Today's pick is the underrated 1991 Alan Rudolph thriller Mortal Thoughts. The flick benefits from a capable cast of recognizable faces, each delivering a dynamic performance. Moreover, the picture boasts a twisty narrative and a noir sensibility complete with at least one femme fatale, harkening back to the golden era of the detective thriller. Mortal Thoughts plays out like this. Cynthia Kellogg sits in a police station, trying to answer the barrage of questions Detective John Woods is hurling at her. Cynthia appears downtrodden and broken as she recalls the events leading up to her arrival at the station. She explains that she and her best gal pal Joyce went to the Feast of St. Rocco Festival in New York with Joyce's no-good husband Jimmy. Cynthia continues providing more context, explaining that Jimmy grew gradually more intoxicated through the evening, ultimately walking back to his van to sleep it off. Cynthia goes on to explain that when she and Joyce returned to the van later that evening, Jimmy was dead from an apparent stab wound to the throat. Detective Woods appears skeptical at the story Cynthia is telling, but allows her to continue. Over the balance of the film, Cynthia fills in blind spots and does her best to explain her role in Jimmy's untimely demise and prove that her intentions were just. A cloud of uncertainty hangs over the proceedings until the day now may, giving the viewer ample time to draw their own conclusions before almost everything becomes apparent in the end. Mortal Thoughts was a passion project for Demi, and it shows. The ghost actor worked as a co-producer on the film, putting in plenty of sweat equity behind the scenes, something about which she spoke during the pre-launch promo phase. The award-winning actor is just as effective on-screen in her turn as Cynthia, which is a delicate balance between femme fatale and woman in the wrong place at the wrong time. She deftly walks that line, playing the character William Riley and Claude Curvin wrote with one foot in each end of that broad spectrum. Moore may be the star of the show, but she's assisted by an exceptional team of supporting players. Bruce Willis is great as Jimmy, the entitled creep husband who meets a fate which few would argue that his character is undeserving. He's smug, arrogant, and completely convincing. Willis is no stranger to tough guy roles. He made a career out of taking on similar parts. However, here we get to see a particularly sinister, violent side of him that we don't see very often. Here he is menacing, unhinged, and a bit like a ticking time bomb. Glenna Headley is also memorable in her turn as the decidedly unstable Joyce. I don't know who, if anyone, needs to hear this, but I can't help but mention that the late actress is a dead ringer for Susan Sarandon in this particular effort. Between sporting a nearly identical ginger-colored haircut to that which Sarandon wore in the early 90s, and speaking in a thick East Coast accent, she's giving Susan Sarandon. With that slightly off-topic detail addressed, I have to tell you that she's also giving a bitchin' performance. Like Moore, she walks the fine line between victim and instigator. It's dynamic characterizations like that that make the film memorable. This isn't a cookie-cutter psychological thriller where each and every key player is clearly guilty or innocent. There's far more nuance than that at play. Jimmy, however, is almost certainly a complete monster. That much isn't really up for debate. Establishing him as a worthless son of a gun allows the audience to direct their attention more readily to Joyce and Cynthia, giving us the time and space to try to make sense of their motives. Speaking of Cynthia and Joyce, we eventually learn of a second death that transpires following Jimmy's grisly departure. While the film never explicitly explains at whose hands the second character ultimately winds up dead, it's easy enough to make an educated guess. I like that approach because it allows for viewer interpretation and gives us something to talk about more than 30 years after the flick first landed in multiplexes. Ambiguities aside, I also have to give the film props for unflinchingly exploring a series of heavy themes, including sexual assault, spousal abuse, and addiction, with more nuance and tact than some films of its era. Director Rudolph doesn't gloss over anything and avoids making moral judgments better left to the audience to mull over and draw their own conclusions. My primary negative critique is that Billy Neal is tragically underutilized in her turn as Detective Linda Nealon. She's scripted as a one-note black woman character and given almost nothing to do. Don't get me wrong, Harvey Keitel's Detective Woods is a strong screen presence playing the quintessential hard-boiled detective, so it makes sense for him to take the lead. With that said, it's insulting that his counterpart is effectively a glorified extra with no meaty or memorable dialogue. Representation has surely changed for the better in the years since, so at least historic wrongs have helped pave the way for progress. All things considered, Mortal Thoughts is a chilling neo-noir that features a dynamite cast, nuanced characterizations, and enough twists to keep the viewer guessing. If I've sold you on the merits of this 1991 thriller and you want to check it out to see what I mean, you can find the picture streaming on Tubi and the Roku channel presently. That's all for this installment of the Overlook Motel. If you'd like to chat more about Underseen and underrated films, feel free to hit me up with your thoughts on Twitter, Threads, or Instagram @FunWithHorror.